Hi everybody, thank you very much for joining us and thank you very much for bearing with us as we've had to change the format of this event. We've got 4 great panellists to talk about emerging technologies and we'll give them a chance to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do. So joining us tonight we have Christine Adeline from VP Product Management from SAI Global. We have Dr. Sue Barn, Director of Tap Into Safety. Cameron Stevens, Digital Safety Concierge. And Stuart Farquharson, Director of Risk Talk. So I'd like to ask each of the speakers to introduce themselves in a minute or two. If they could just speak for a minute or two about their area of interest with emerging technologies. For our audience members, if you've got any questions as we go through, please use the question and answer chat box, and we will be monitoring that throughout the session and putting those questions to our speakers. So maybe if I can throw to Sue first of all to introduce yourself.
Yep, thanks, Manda. Hello, everyone. I am the Director and CEO of Tap Into Safety, and we have an online and mobile-friendly interactive safety and mental health training platform. The safety courses focus on high-risk tasks and assess against controls and critical control measures, which you need to meet your WHS obligations and to protect you against the industrial manslaughter laws. The mental health modules cover a broad range of topics and use micro-learning to train in coping strategies and where to seek help. And finally, the platform includes a robust reporting backend that produces gap analysis reports. Thanks, Manda.
Thanks, Sue. Christine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Amanda. I'm Christine Adeline, the VP of Product Management at SAI Global. I'm responsible for the SAI Global's EHS and operational risk software and mobile app. And our software solution enables the automation of EHS and operational risk processes. It is an easy to use software with an accompanying mobile app, and it allows you to really engage your workers in your EHS and operational risk processes. We also have very powerful business intelligence tools that allows all that data that you capture through our software and via mobile to be analyzed, but also shared back so that you enable smart decisions to be made by everyone in your organization. Our mission is to really enable EHS and operational risk professionals to really focus on their key tasks and enable their companies to be more productive and their businesses more sustainable. Thank you, Manda.
Great, thanks, Christine. Stuart, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself, Stuart?
Yeah, thanks for that. I guess Risk Talk we started about 4 years ago, and it was purely started because we were talking to people on the ground and they asked, well, why can't we just talk about what risks are involved and how we can control them? And I said, yeah, that's a great idea. Now we've got to capture that. And so we started developing some technology around that, and then it's just kind of built on top of that. And so our Risk Talk is a completely voice-based, intuitive, engaging tool built for the person on the ground. And because the person on the ground's loving it, they're more efficient. They're more engaged in the process, and because they do like it, it spits out some amazing data. And because I don't know if you know, but 90% of the world's data has been collected within the last 2 years, and pretty much all of that's because of the utilization of voice data, like Google Home, Alexa, and those kind of things. And so I believe that voice tech is going to become the next big thing. Well, it almost already is, but in the safety space. So that's it's a bit of a background on Risk Talk.
Great, thanks, Stuart. And Cameron, welcome.
Thanks, Manda. So my title there probably is a little cryptic, Digital Safety Concierge, but that's how I view what I do. I currently work for a hardware provider, so an augmented assisted reality headset. You can probably see it on my head in that picture. The other three, I think, are a little more in software. More importantly, though, I'm I'm an absolute fanatic for digital technology and emerging technologies for health and safety outcomes. I'm a physio by trade originally, and so my entire purpose is built on the purpose of trying to help people. And I believe that if we want to dramatically improve health and safety outcomes, we need to start looking at digital emerging technologies, innovative work practices to do that. I think the way that we've been doing things is not driving the value proposition or impact that we need to as health and safety professionals in this current age, particularly currently with the crisis going on with coronavirus. It's a classic example of where we can leverage these technologies to create impact and value. And my job title there of digital safety concierge is really about connecting health and safety professionals with all of the types of technologies and innovative work practices that do exist, to try and be like you would go down to the hotel concierge, you know, what is there out there for me to help solve these problems using technology, using different styles of approach, building digital literacy for folks so that they understand when we're talking about assisted, mixed, augmented, virtual reality, we can talk about that openly rather than having fear around what that is. And then ultimately just trying to propel the profession into the future. So I'm on the WHS branch and am the sort of creator of the LinkedIn group, which you should all join, which is the Global Safety, Technology and Innovation Network. That's me.
Great, thanks Cameron. Well, look, to start the ball rolling, I thought we'd just start off with one question that we put to all the panelists to get an idea of what you see as the changes that we're going to be happening in health and safety. So can you give us some tangible examples of what you think technology is going to change the role of the health and safety professional over the next 5 years? Sue, would you like to start off on that?
Yep, thanks for that, Manda. Look, I can only speak in terms of the way we view the role of health and safety and HR, because it does actually cross over in what we're seeing with our current clients. And the move is clearly towards using technology, as in online and mobile friendly platforms. We deal in training. We are looking at high risk activities, particularly in safety. So therefore, making sure that we're covering off on our OH&S obligations to prove our workers' continued compliance and competence and understanding of hazards and risks and control measures, and to be able to provide evidence that their employees are remaining competent. There's no longer this view of training for life. You know, you do your ticket, that's it. You don't need to do anything for the next 20 years. That doesn't cut it anymore with our OSH obligations, and it certainly doesn't cut it under the industrial manslaughter laws. So we see the need for continual and ongoing learning, which is, you know, what you're seeing in universities now, and as adults we feel that there's a lifetime of learning in other areas. And that technology can really help, because gone are the days when you're going to take your staff, your employees off what they're doing, sit them in a classroom, give them death by PowerPoint, or have a trainer stand up there and train. It's just old school. It's not relevant. It's risky as well, because you're relying on the trainer to be upbeat and knowledgeable the whole time. And look, it's just time away from when you really can be, you know, producing, which is what it's all about. And this whole coronavirus emergency is really showing there's a critical need to be able to put your training online, and to have it as a mobile friendly version as well is also awesome. And it's great to see that we've got safety tech across the board that can actually do all the functions we need using online tech. The other piece is mental health, and that is sorely missed, in that, you know, we're still doing a lot of face-to-face workshops and so on, but you're seeing, you know, governments are now supporting counselling that's done via technology, where you're using Zoom and things like we're doing just now to try and help and support employees. But then it also can go into training where you can do those sort of things easily using wonderful micro-learning pieces now as well. So for us, you know, I'm pretty focused on those particular areas, but I can just see safety and physical and psychological really starting to boom in the next 3 years using every piece of technology we can. So yeah, that's our take on it. Thanks, Manda.
Great, thanks, Sue. So Christine, I mean, Sue's just touched on the, you know, proving the compliance and competence that using the technology to do that. Do you see that as being a big part of what you're working towards over the next 5 years?
I guess from SEI Global's perspective, we offer an integrated platform, and at the heart of this platform for us, it's data. All right, so that's the main reason why we offer that, is you can collect all this data. Yes, there is that compliance element, but what we are seeing globally is that need to go beyond using technology just for compliance, just to be a tick in the box, and to leverage that data in a far more efficient way so you can actually mitigate your risks better and prevent incidents and injuries happening in the first place. And so for us, that's where we're seeing, and technologies such that are coming on, such as, you know, AI or the advanced data analytics tools, you know, natural language processing, machine learning, that can be applied to data that you've already collected, that will be that will enable the EHS professionals to get better insights so they can prevent those injuries from happening in the first place. So it's getting more than just being compliant. But from our side, what we also see is there will be all these devices and those emerging techs that will also remove workers from undertaking dangerous tasks in the first place. So we things like drones or UAVs, for example, will completely remove workers from those dangerous tasks. But also then, Sue touched on training. Better training using AR and VR will then better prepare employees for dangerous situations without having to put them in those dangerous situations as well. So ultimately, with data and those emerging techs, I think we will move beyond just compliance, and we will move into the world where we're really being good at managing our risks and ultimately preventing all these incidents and injuries from happening. That's the way I see the biggest impact tech will have. And of course, when you have all these emerging tech also all connected together and providing you with even more data, that's when you get better results from that, and better insights to help you being better at managing your risks for health and safety. Okay.
No, that's great. Thank you, Christine. So with that, Stuart, obviously a perfect introduction to you, because you were just talking about the amount of data that's been collected over the last 2 years. Over the next 5 years, what are we going to do with all this data? What do you see that developing as?
Next 5 years, good question. I was actually having a chat with a guy called Stephen Sheila. I don't know if anyone knows him, but he is the CEO of Facebook for Australia and New Zealand, and he said that over the next 5 years, we're going to be collecting data, yet we wouldn't have any idea what we're going to be doing with it now. We'll only know what we're doing with it in 5 years. But the one trend, and it was just touched on before, the one trend I definitely see is going to be occurring is in the mental health space around voice data. So, I mean, there's already a huge amount you can do with sentiment analysis around there's something called arousal level, which is quite funny, but it's a what kind of emotion or mood the person is in at the time just by the way they're talking, and then you can start looking into further things like alcohol and drugs. Hopefully mental health things, anxiety, stress, depression, and even for especially in the mining world or oil and gas or swing people that are on swings, you can definitely start looking at changes in voice over their swing from start to finish, night shift, day shift. So there can be a huge range of data that you can collect to start learning from those kind of things and putting in actions before anything occurs, obviously. But I mean, pitch, tone, glottal movements, there's a huge range of data you can collect just by the way people talk. So it's a very important thing to do, and a lot of call centres are already doing a lot of sentiment analysis to guide you to the correct person to deal with you. Most call centres pop a hiding for because it's either Optus or Telstra or your gas isn't working, but they can put you onto the right people for the kind of stress level you're under, and we can utilise a lot of that technology already.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. It sounds very interesting in the current environment, particularly.
Yeah.
So, Cameron, what's your take on the next 5 years? If we're talking, obviously mental health has come up a little bit, and then looking at the stress patterns from people, what do you see happening over the next 5 years in health and safety?
Well, my view is that we will either adapt or die. That's a little bit doom and gloom of me, but I believe that if we don't improve our literacy around technology, if we don't partner with ICT, so our information systems teams, and develop a strategy around deployment of digital technologies, then we will struggle to maintain our relevance, and some of these problems in the workplace will be solved by other functions within our businesses. So I believe that the next 5 years will be a race to whoever wants to use these technologies to enable health and safety outcomes the most. I would say at the moment, leading the charge are operations and maintenance. They are fully invested in wanting to get this done. And my belief is that it's probably more the health and safety professional mindset to put too many barriers in place for emerging technologies to be deployed. And I think that in the next 5 years, we could be at 30 to 40% automation at the workplace for high-risk tasks in mining, oil and gas, and utilities. And I think there will be a whole other series of technologies that will impact the healthcare sector, the education sector, and all of the other sectors that exist, both high risk and medium to lower risk in terms of fatal outcome consequences. And as I said, I think we have a massive opportunity in the next 5 years to steer the direction, and that will determine where we head. The next 10 to 15 is going to be dependent on how well we perform in the next 5.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. So I'll start off, we've got questions coming through from the audience. So I'll start off with a question open to any of the panelists who'd like to answer. We're talking about the implementation and some of the mindsets required around implementing. So what are the barriers for adopting emerging technologies in health and safety? And then how do we demonstrate the value for money to our businesses that might be concerned with cost? Who would like to go first on that one?
Yeah, I'll give just a quick answer with one of those. So the barriers that we definitely experience, one, and it's just been touched on before, is that and especially with a lot of industrial manslaughter laws and things coming out, everyone's very much focused on trying to keep people out of prison and keep people safe. And we get this a lot. It's like, we've just got to make sure that we've got all the boxes ticked so people don't go to prison. And like, well, no, you're looking at it the wrong way. Your job is to enable the guy on the ground or the girl on the ground to perform their job as safe as possible and efficiently as well. And then they're the ones that are going to keep you out of prison, not any boxes that are ticked or 50-page swims that you've got absolutely everything in there. But people are very scared to move away from having everything in a document and then focus on enabling that person on the ground. Yeah, and also on that, people are also very scared to move away from their strategies as well. I heard a wise man say the other day, if you do a strategy at the start of the year and you go through and complete everything in your strategy, you failed. And that's because technology and people and environments are changing so often that you shouldn't be able to complete a strategy, because you should be updating it and finishing it, and using better technology or new things that are out there, or looking for things. But strategies seem to be a bit of a hindrance rather than something to enable people at the moment. Yeah, I guess that's as far as a couple of barriers that have been put in place. As far as the cost goes, a lot of companies don't really, depending on what time or what type of company, they just don't like being locked into big contracts, which is probably the most enabling thing, because pretty much all technology these days is moving in a very similar way to SaaS products. So they can give it a go. If it doesn't work, then move out. So I think that's an enabling thing, and I think a lot of companies will start moving to that very quickly.
I think another one is fear of trying something new, fear of technology, because, you know, if you're of the vintage of, you know, 50 plus, and I certainly am, it's not something that we've been trained in. We're not used to it. So, you know, if we don't know what we're doing, how are we supposed to get the rest of our workforce to be able to do this, you know, use it? And I think that's our job as software developers, to make sure that our, you know, UX UI is easy to use and our interfaces are easy to use. And if we can use mobile, because most people can use their phone, then we're kind of getting a device in someone's hands that they're pretty comfortable with. And the other piece is cost. I agree with you, Cameron, you know, that we're still viewing safety as a cost rather than safety as a savings, which it is, because, you know, any injury, of course, is going to cost you far more going down the track. And I agree with you as well. These lock-in contracts, annual licenses, subscriptions and things like that really do put people off, because they pay for often far more than they actually use. And yes, going into SaaS models, into, you know, purchase buy as you use, credits, those kind of things, which is where we certainly are, is definitely opening the doors and making it an easy entry in, as well as an easy entry out if you don't like what you're using.
I think from our perspective, the biggest challenge that we see, and that's related to cost, is often the EHS or the buyers that we see cannot articulate the real benefit of the technology they are adopting. And that then when it goes to board level to get those technologies, then the board who looks at numbers and numbers only, that's all they care about, they don't get their business cases through. And that is partly because they can't articulate a value to the problem or the challenge they're facing. And also they cannot articulate the longer term benefit of that. But if you look at, we've got a couple, I'll give you a good example of a really successful client that we have. And they had a challenge, a couple of challenges, but one was around their premium, workers' compensation. It was going up, right? So they were able to use that as one of their key bases of trying to use technology to help them reduce that. But it didn't stop there. They were able to prove, but after they got their business case through, that a year on from their going live, that they saw an improvement in that, plus other metrics. So they kept monitoring that over a period of years. And what they have been able to do is not just start off with one technology, but then adopt as they go along, because the business was actually seeing value and they were presenting that in metrics. And that is one of the key things. And often we see our buyers get attracted by bright and shiny new toys, And as such, they just want to look at those new toys as opposed to really relating that to a challenge and a business problem they're having. And that is something we see, and from a software and mobile solution provider, we see that more often. The other challenge in adopting, that's also adopting technology, is, I agree, is around UI, your user interface, but it's not just your user interface, is your user experience as well. And often the technology is chosen and is implemented without involving any of your key users who will be using those technologies. Too often I've seen people build processes that have, I know it's an exaggeration, but there have been 400 fields for a user to complete. Now, no one is going to complete that, and therefore your technology will fail. So you really need to think about, what is it you're trying to solve? Who are your users who will be using this technology? Engage them as early as possible so that you get success. And once you get success with one technology and your users love it, others will be easy for you to justify. And I think that's where we have seen from the clients that have been successful in adopting our technology. Another barrier that is coming up, probably not so much in Australia, but globally, is the whole data privacy. And, you know, in Europe, GDPR is really big, and that is often a barrier, especially with wearable devices. It is becoming a little bit of a barrier. And this is where we say, well, you need to really work closely with your counterparts or and build relationships with people in your organization who understand that and can help you overcome these barriers. So those are the things we see from our side.
Great, thanks, Christine.
I just wanted to quickly jump in on something very quickly, and it was a couple of the presenters talked about SaaS. And apart from like me walking down the runway in like a sequin outfit, that's SaaS. SaaS is S, two little A's and then another capital S, is software as a service. And I think this is the type of stuff that once you understand what some of these terminology is, hardware as a service, H, two little A's and a big S, those types of things, once you get familiar with that, there's a lot less friction to be able to have those conversations with the people in your businesses that you need to talk about when you are, in this case, purchasing software. So software as a service is simply you're purchasing a software on, like you're renting the software on a month by month subscription versus buying it outright. And I think it's this, you're distilling down some of these simple terms and making the ability to digest this stuff a lot easier. And it's easy once you know what a SaaS model is and what software as a service is to just roll off the tongue and say SaaS, and people are supposed to know what that means. But I'm thinking this is one of the biggest friction in relation to adopting technologies, is we don't actually really know what we're talking about when we say it to each other. That's not being derogatory, it's just the current landscape. There's so many acronyms and so much going on. So yeah, I'm interested to know what people think about that in the chat box. And yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks, Cameron. So I'm hearing a theme here was, you know, adopting new technologies, the barrier of not wanting to change, and not being able to articulate, you know, the benefits of what they're adopting. So if I'm a health and safety professional and I start off with a problem, say, you know, my workers' compensation premiums are too high, where should we start looking in terms of what do we need to articulate to find a solution to a problem when it comes to technologies? We've talked a lot also about the UX design. So if you can incorporate that, where should the health and safety professional start?
I can pick that up.
Sure, Cameron.
So I think the best way is to flip. Design thinking is closely linked with software and development and product development. And we would flip that around to say, how might we reduce workers' compensation premiums? Or how might we solve this working at height challenge? And the next employment would be some form of co-design process, which is where, like in health and safety, where we know we need to engage all key stakeholders in the decision making to come up with what are the hazards, what are the risks, and what are the controls. How do we solve this problem? And then someone in that conversation applying a technology lens to that. So how might we reduce workers' compensation premiums in our business, and then having someone in that forum to be applying a technology lens. Now, if we adopt that approach, and hopefully the listeners, the attendees in this forum can have a think about perhaps taking that back into the workplace with some practical advice to say, okay, let's flip the question to this how might we scenario, get the right people in the room, and then at least someone in that scenario put on that technology lens. And if you don't know, and again, and I'm not trying to spruik myself, but that's the point of this kind of concierge role is, if you don't know, who can you go and ask? So, you know, tap into your network. You've obviously got 3 great people on here with software options and links to further networks as well. But you're not supposed to know everything that's out there. So ask your network. Ask the how might we question, and then ask your network to help crowdsource the solution.
Okay, I might jump in as well. Thanks, Cameron, because that's a great segue. So your example of, say, you've got a working at height issue, a lot of smaller firms don't have the resources to be able to do too much in-house, which is what you're saying, reach out to networks. It's a great idea. But what you can do too is then, you know, look at platforms that offer, as we do, you know, training that's been developed from tier 1 clients who have already identified the critical risk and critical control measures, and, you know, have your employees go through that training piece and try and make it, you know, as interactive as possible, because it has a better learning outcome. But that's all very well. The final piece that you really need in order to get those workers' compensation claims down is reporting. You need to know exactly what your people do and don't know around the risks that, you know, you're having, and whether they understand how to control those risks. And if that is done well and your injuries start to come down, then that's a way of proving that you're improving. Therefore, your workers' compensation claim premiums can come down. But a lot of, some insurance companies are happy with the fact that you've put in a good system that will give you that data, and are happy to start reducing your premiums simply because you have done something proactive that's more than just your usual induction or death by PowerPoint training.
Great, thanks, Sue. So when we're talking about the reporting and the data, which has already come up as a conversation tonight, how important is UX design in making sure that we're getting the right data out of our systems?
100%. We spend our whole lives trying to make sure that we're giving you good data, and Christine will say the same, I'm sure, because we talk about this at length. You know, what do you actually need to know? Well, in our case, you need to know whether your people know how to work safely and understand the correct control measures, which you've already worked out generally through your own risk assessment processes. Or if you're a smaller firm, then you're taking the guidance from larger firms. You have to have data that means something. There's no point collecting data for the sake of data. And I'm going to throw to Christine because she's expert at this. And yeah, go to it, Christine.
Yeah, I cannot stress your last point, Sue, where you say collecting data for the sake of collecting data is where people get it wrong. I harp about this because I see it so often. I see it so often because we bring in 200 stakeholders who all want to capture this for the sake of capturing this piece of data. At the end of the day, you need to, again, going back to something Cameron said, was twist the problem around. Stop thinking about, oh, how much data can I collect? Think about what problems or what challenges or what you don't know in your organization, what you're trying to solve, and work your way backwards to then try and say, what is important for me to collect? And also, what is the bare minimum? People do not want to spend time putting information in. You need to make it easy and fast for them to put that data in. This is where mobile technology comes in. And I believe Stuart talked about voice technology. You know, the easier you make it for that person, the user, to supply you with the data, that's where you will win. But you also have to think about what you want out of this data and what you're trying to find. Just collecting it for the sake of collecting it is where I see always, it's like, oh, we want to collect this because we think one day we're going to use it. We want to collect every single piece of information that happened about an incident because we think one day we're going to use it. We have no idea, but we think it's important. I think this is where companies really fail about linking and making sure they collect the data, making it easy for the people to use this data. But it also comes down to the technology as well and what you're using. Of course, you need to make sure that the software, the mobile app, or any emerging tech that you're using is also easy at the point that you're buying this as well. Okay.
No, that's great.
I might just jump in quickly on that one as well. Sorry, but the data needs to come from the people on the ground. They're the ones that are at risk, and they're the ones that the decisions are going to be made for. So if people are going back and then punching a whole bunch of data into their laptops or into their desktops or anything, it's not the truest data source. The data definitely has to, I mean, if you look at all the big companies around the world, they don't have your Amazons or your Googles or Facebooks. They don't have people like, someone doesn't request something on Facebook and someone goes and punches it on in the back end and they produce data from it. It's all live data coming from the people on the ground. And I think that's the most important thing.
Okay, so Stuart, so when you're talking about live data, you are sort of talking things like wearables where it's going through automatically and...
Wearables is, yeah, that's unbelievable, having wearables. Well, even
Mobile.
like even mobile devices it's from the person on the ground. Even Cam's realware there, that's from that person on the ground. It's not a safety professional punching in an incident report in the back end. That's not as real data as you can get, or it's not people doing risk registers, sitting down and doing a whole workshop on for 3 days with very expensive corporate people in there. It's about the people on the ground and then using that data to capture all that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stuart. So with the capturing data, live data from people on the ground, do you think that's one of the ways to get around the barrier of people who may not be familiar with technology? We're still in an environment where a lot of the workforce is not used to using technology as a day-to-day lifestyle. Is that one of the ways that we can get around that issue?
For the people on the ground, we've never had a problem with implementing anything for the people on the ground because they've always wanted to talk, and a lot of the people that are using our kind of product on the ground hate writing. They often hate the way they write. They are often embarrassed about their spelling, but can do a brilliant job of what they do. This is especially in heavy industry. So having been able to talk and have that conversation, which they generally have anyway, they're very happy to do that. So getting the data from the people on the ground, they've always been very happy. It's where the barriers are further up, and that's mostly with integration. Sorry to kind of sidetrack the conversation a bit, but I believe that if you're gonna move forward in this kind of technology space in the world, and I know Christine mentioned it earlier on when she was talking about SR Global, you've got to be able to integrate with other companies, and that's what essentially a lot of these companies want. If you're going to present to them, they say, well, can you integrate with this and this and this? And the technology needs to be built as though they can integrate with it. And a lot of the forward-thinking companies out there, they're looking at very bespoke safety systems. So they might have Cameron's product, our product, and Sue and Christine's product and Sue's product all in the one, which are all talking to each other. Rather than just having one system where they think they can do everything the best. I know Auckland City Council have been talking about getting the best of everything. So they might use, for their auditing, they might use iAuditor. For risk management on the ground, they might use us. For a system in the back end, they might use Christine's and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of bespoke products that can talk to each other is better than one company that tries to do everything the best.
Okay.
Sorry,
You know,
that's probably got off subject a lot, but
I agree with that. We just got to have it that it is easily integrated. That's the problem. So if we can get, have everything on the cloud, it's easier to integrate at that point. We look at single sign-ons, we look at APIs to get the data back into learning management systems and so on. Then you can actually do something with the data. And that's the difficulty as well, because a lot of clients just want the one-stop shop, as you're saying, but how can you expect one software company to be able to solve all of your problems in one go? You really are not getting the expertise. 100% agree.
I think in the emerging tech, and what I'm talking about here are things like I say, if you're going to use drones for inspections, for example, if you're going to use wearables to track the location of your employees, if you're going to use technology that just simply allows you to do things like geofencing, it will be from multiple vendors. And that is the way those emerging tech will work. So ultimately, it is critical if you want good data and you want to analyze it, you will need a platform that collects all of those and so can talk to a lot of all these tech and all these other systems. But you also still need to go back to basics as well and make sure, going back to a point that I think Stuart mentioned, is you need to make it easy for people on the ground as well to capture information that you need. And often, I mean, mobile has been around for years, and yet the uptake of mobile for EHS globally, in a recent survey, it's alarmingly low. So we're not talking expensive tech here, but the use of mobile in that space to make it easy to capture data, not just capture, but get information anytime, anywhere, is still not being adopted and moving as fast as I thought it was. And that's in a recent global survey that Videntics, one of the analyst firms, published. So we're talking emerging techs, and yes, they will need to talk to each other, but we also need to go back to basics and make sure that we're using tech that is currently available, but that tech makes it really, really easy to collect the data that you need from the people that you need on the ground there and then as well. Okay.
So can I just add, I just want to add a viewpoint here about with respect as well. We're kind of talking about fairly lower order controls at the moment on the hierarchy of risk controls. And I think health and safety professionals typically feel like they're well placed to dabble in the perhaps PPE through administration control layer, perhaps a little further up the chain, but then it starts swapping into engineering departments or other people, and we start losing a little bit of control. And if we're talking about emerging, like true emerging technology, things that connect to the internet, sensors, robotics, autonomous vehicles, fully autonomous drones, totally autonomous equipment, putting people into space fully remotely, those sorts of things actually not people, equipment into space. Those sorts of things are way further up the hierarchy of risk controls to eliminate. You know, they're at the elimination, substitution, isolation level, absolutely. And I think there's this space in between, which is digitally enhanced hierarchy of controls. And for me, when you do something like an incident investigation or an inquiry into work to determine how can we improve or solve a problem, we need to look at the entire ecosystem of what's possible to solve that problem. And certainly software, frontline risk management technologies that are enhanced with digital, things that we've talked about today, but there's a whole series of additional things that typically health and safety professionals feel are well out of their grasp. Now, how much control do we have how much influence do we have on what we would typically perceive as an engineering task to develop a fully robotic system? You know, do we have the ability to influence that? Absolutely we do. And I think health and safety professionals need to partner more strongly with engineering departments, design departments, ICT, IT groups, finance, understand budgets, understand these types of parts of our businesses to be able to influence the direction of some of those things. Look at the opportunities as well as the risks, and then look at the human side of how we impact that. So if we're truly looking at emerging technologies, I think we can really extend this discussion far further than software and hardware stacks to being the entire ecosystem of how we actually perform work.
Right, thanks, Cameron. So with this, are we looking at a different skill set, both for health and safety professionals, but also what about with the workers? What sort of skills do we need to promote in these populations to be able for them to be able to use these emerging technologies?
I might talk to that. I think we need to go back to basics, which is what Christine was saying as well. We need to start with technology that people are familiar with and can manage. And I think mobile is really one that, as Christine also said, hasn't been taken up widely yet. I think it's becoming more and more. You've got to also think of your audience, as a few of us have mentioned already before as well. When you're dealing with, when your employees are, mainly hands-on, they're in industrial settings, for want of a better term, and I hate this term, blue-collar workers, you've really got to keep things at something, in a way, that they can actually handle without scaring them too much. And I think we sometimes get carried away with, let's try out the latest new tech, without realizing that, a lot of this tech isn't used in the home, isn't used in everyday life. So therefore there's a big leap. So I think we need to take it slowly, baby steps, and get people comfortable, and then from there grow.
Okay, does the rest of the panel see it the same way, or are we going back to basics, or do we need to be sort of training the workforce to try and take on these technologies more, or give them those skills to use technology?
I think it depends what type of workforce you have as well. So you will see that the younger generation are already familiar with tech. It's their way of life. So if you roll out a piece of technology, you will probably find that the uptake, it depends on the age that you have. And so the younger generation will probably just take it like that and roll with it. But some generation wasn't tech wasn't part of their way of life, so they struggle a little bit to take that on. And I think this is where, as the person who's rolling this out, need to understand who they're rolling it out to, and ensure that they cater the rollout of these techs for these different groups in their workspace, in their workplace. So one of the things with the, I'd say the generation that probably doesn't like tech, is to take it slow and really ensure that you are showing them the outcomes and the benefits that will impact them. Because if you don't show it to them in a way that they understand and translates in their world, then yeah, so that will not work. So you, as EHS professionals who's rolling this out, you need to have a good understanding of who you're dealing with and being able to tell what the benefits are for them and take them on that journey. But secondly, going back to all these up and coming tech that we are seeing, some of them really do not require and I guess uptake. So if you're giving somebody like a wearable that they're going to wear on them and so on, that's actually not hard to deploy, because they're just going to wear this and you're going to get this information, and often it beeps, and it's very easy. So I think that skill set that you need to adopt technology will just depend on the technology you're rolling out. But ultimately, EHS professionals need to just understand who they're rolling it out to, what they're rolling it out, and being able to advise and tell their user base the benefits of those in a much clearer way and in their language. Stop saying, oh, we want to roll this out because the business wants us to roll this out to reduce our risks. Tell it in terms of their, what benefits they will get and how easy it will be and how it will impact them in the language they are used to. I think that's a skill that whoever's deploying that tech will need to have, is being able to articulate those benefits more clearly to those users. That's from my perspective, and I've seen that work with some of our clients who've rolled out technology. Okay.
I actually don't even think you really need to. Well, you shouldn't have to roll out too much technology. Because if you look at all the best companies in the world, they don't have procedures about how to use their tech. So it should be very intuitive. You don't go buy an iPhone and then go read the manual. Even with cars or anything else we do in life, it's like we don't have. Well, we don't go read procedures to go do that. Everything's expected to be intuitive. So our technology also should be the same. You shouldn't need a manual to tell you how to do a risk assessment, or a procedure how to do a risk assessment, and then a what good looks like page about how to do that risk assessment as well. It should all just be, oh, it's asking you a question, you answer a question. And it's got to be as intuitive as possible. Otherwise, you're just going to lose engagement with people on the ground instantly.
I agree with that, but often we buy mobile phones for personal use, and the things, we use it because we love Facebook and we love going on there for, because we love that. How many people within the organization really think doing a risk assessment is fun and so want to bother with that? This is where I was going to say that you need to articulate the benefits to them in a language that will make it attractive to them. Don't just say, oh, it's because the company wants you to do this. The technology, I agree, needs to be easy, but you also need to articulate why they need to do it. Because you go out and buy a phone because I want to phone my friends and I want to go on Facebook. I don't buy a phone because the company wants me to fill in a checklist and so on. That's probably something that I was going at as well. But I agree, it needs to be easy for people to use straight away.
Yeah, so Christine, you were talking about people getting better at articulating the benefits, the outcome and benefits of these technologies to get people on board. With that in mind, can you think of how health and safety professionals should better prepare for these upcoming technologies?
I think one of the things is understanding what those technologies do and what benefits they bring. But if you don't understand some of the, I think someone, I wasn't sure whether it was, I think it was Cameron, where it says there are a lot of buzzwords around those technologies that often confuse people as to what they do and what there's benefits. I think one of the fundamental things is, as EHS professionals, you need to work with people who actually understand the technology and can help you articulate that in your problem, to solve a problem. I think often trying to think that EHS people have to be tech people as well is where they often fall down. You need to work with the key people who understand the technology and can help you articulate the business side with that technology is key. Don't think you have to do it yourselves. I think that is, if that is a message that I can send, that is important. And, you know, people like Cameron, who we have on the call, is probably an ideal person who can work with you because he understands the tech, but also can work with an EHS professional who has very limited information about the tech, but really is good at health and safety. I think that combination is where you have a winning combination of rolling out technology. Okay.
I'd just like to add to that in terms of, typically what I'm seeing with technology deployments is that it's actually not the health and safety professional that is, so apart from health and safety software, general or frontline risk management software, it's typically operations and maintenance, as I've discussed before, that are the ones that have the budget, that are procuring the technology and implementing, particularly the more engineering related emerging tech, let's say drones as an example, to do inspections. And the return of investment calculation is very simple for them in terms of saving costs on maintenance, saving, you know, in terms of time, labor, etc. What I like to do, and a practical takeaway for those of you on the bridge, is to think of your health and safety problems on an axis. So put a graph in your mind with health and safety problems that you're currently facing. So you could call those the risks on one side of the graph. Doesn't matter if it's the bottom or the top. And on the other side of the graph would be, what are all of the current ways that I'm solving that? You know, it could be certain types of training. It might be with some form of policy or some form of control, and you'd list all of those controls. There might be governance forums and audits and all the things that you would typically do. Then you would have a look at these technologies that are currently being rolled out in operations and maintenance. Let's say it's a drone. And you would look at your health and safety problems on one side of your axis, and you'd look at your controls and you'd go, could I enhance that control by using this technology that I know is being used in ops and maintenance? I can partner with them and I can enable a really significant health and safety outcome by using an already deployed solution. Once you've done that successfully, you now have a partnership that you can then start really driving your own agenda to get your own return on investment, in terms of having a improved engagement. It might be improved access to information, improved sort of maybe even job satisfaction, employee retention, some of the other, and obviously injuries and reduction of critical events and fatigue incidents and things like that. So have a think about doing that. And again, like Christine said, if you need advice, speak to your software providers, speak to your hardware and technology providers to see, you know, if they can assist you in crafting that story for you. You know, they typically have a business development component to their business and can help support you to do that. So leverage your partners, and they will enable you to create a significant return on investment calculation and business value proposition for your key stakeholders. That's my 2 cents.
Great, thanks, Cameron. So talking about the development, but just moving on to the implementation. So we had a comment in the audience about, I think intuitive is essential, but a degree of structured rollout is essential for continuity and to establish a benchmark understanding. So in terms of structured rollout and the implementation of technology, what is your advice on a successful implementation? What does that look like or involve? Anybody want to run with that one?
I think I'll start on that one. It depends on the technology that you're rolling out and who you're rolling this out to. But speaking from software a vendor and who does implementation as well. I think a successful rollout will depend on, one, that level of partnership that the customer has with the supplier or vendor. Okay. Too often I see it's a one-sided relationship where the customer totally and utterly relies on the vendor rolling this out and being successful. And this is where, for me, 100% of the time, if that's the way it is, then you're going to fail. It needs to be that partnership, and that works, you know, in parallel to ensure the success of that tech. But some of the key components of that rollout plan is to, one, understand again who you're rolling it out to. Change management. It's like really, really important for you to understand what level of changes you're going to do, and also cater for that during your plan. Often what we see is successful is what companies now do is a phased rollout. So rather than doing big bang approach and just going, hey, here it is, here's the tech, go roll it out. They roll it out, you know, in smaller portions for a smaller group, and then roll it out to the wider mass. That's where we've seen, again, this is from our experience, the bigger success is where people do a staggered or phased approach to rollout. But also is measuring and having key points where you have metrics and you're measuring those success of those rollouts. At SEI, we have 3 different rollout implementation methodologies that we've been using for years. And when you work with us, we will work with you to choose what is the best to suit what you're trying to do, and also, you know, what it is you're trying to roll out as well. If you're rolling out 20 different processes, you could be rolling out incident, for example, risk, hazard, inspections, audits. This is where we will guide you on the best way. So that's a longer term probably rollout, and we will guide you on that one. But you could be rolling out just one simple process, and so there is a methodology to get you up and running quickly on that. Again, this is where I stress the partnership that you build with that vendor is critical to the success of your rollout. Okay.
Great, thank you, Christine. Has any of the other panelists got comments about implementation and how to create a successful implementation?
There's lots and lots of information available. I would suggest that the Deloitte presentations and Accenture's presentations that they have in their emerging technology roadmap guidance online is probably the most balanced and cool looking. Same with Fjord, who's a subsidiary of Deloitte tech provider. And yeah, I'd go to those and then apply a health and safety lens to it. So if you're looking for some good tools, then check out the Accenture Industry X.0 and the Deloitte Emerging Technology. Just Google them, you'll find them, and you'll get lost in all of the information that you'll find there. They're 2 of the consulting houses, but all the rest of them have them too, but they're just quite well structured and visual. I use an 8-step rollout that we have at RealWare. We're a hardware provider, so we have a different solution rollout process than a software vendor would, and that's a nuanced difference that you'll see. And I think Stuart talked about integration before. That also includes another whole series of challenges around rollout. But yeah, it really depends on the type of technology you're rolling out as to what your methodology will be. And there's no one fits all approach. And the best advice I can give is it's all about the end user. So put yourself in the shoes of the person that needs to use the technology, and go and ask them, what do they need to be successful? And then what do their supervisors, managers, and others need to ensure that that's going to be successful. It's the best advice I can give with off the cuff.
Great, thanks, Cameron. So I'll just move to a question from the audience, which is how technology will help with people working from home and for outdoor workers and healthcare. So I think the gist is going for the industries that don't so much adopt tech at the moment. What sort of technologies are out there to help these workers?
Well, that's really broad. So we're covering across quite a few different industries there.
Well, maybe what are the sort of upcoming things in emerging technology at the moment that people should be keeping an eye out for?
There's miles of technology that they should be keeping an eye out for. So I'm not quite sure how we can narrow it. Depends on what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to measure. I'm not sure if that question was maybe, or maybe I could push it into, you know, psychological injuries and mental health. Probably a couple of things that people are worried about at the moment with, you know, coronavirus, self-isolating and working from home. What does that mean as an impact on people who are generally perhaps in a more social environment in the workplace? We do need to be monitoring people's mental health. Right now, people are very anxious. They don't know what's going to happen. None of us know what's going to happen, what's ahead of us. How secure is our job? Are we going to get coronavirus? If we do, what does that mean? And so on. So if you have got your staff now working from home, it's a really good idea to be doing check-ins, and you can use technology for that. So you can set up, you know, your basic chat sort of, I guess, software. You know, there's several of them. Many people are using Slack. There's those that use Skype, and it goes on. And just checking, you know, perhaps daily to see how people are going. Another option is to use, you know, your online chats in terms of mental health support. You can take up mental health training that teaches coping strategies. You can just make sure that they know where that they can seek help if they need additional help. Give them access, obviously, to your EAP if you have one, and, you know, other government support agencies, etc. So I know I'm sort of pushing it into psychological health, but we haven't actually talked about that. And that's an area of major emerging technology.
Oh, that's great. So thank you. With the current environment and the issues with a lot of people working at home who are possibly not used to it, it is going to be interesting to see what happens in that space over the coming months.
Well, yeah, I mean, isolation and loneliness is a real issue. We're already seeing reports, you know, there's a whole loneliness study that's been done that show that we really are a very lonely set of people these days, and this is only going to exacerbate. And I think that organisations are, you know, trying to get themselves sorted right now and trying to make sure people can work from home, and, you know, should they be getting their flu shot, and how do we address policies of, you know, visitors to our workplace, and if people get sick, etc. But you really can't take your eye off the ball of mental health and safety, because, you know, you're running skeleton crews, maybe people aren't being supervised as much. There's a risk of an injury, but you've also got isolation, people working from home. So now there's a risk of mental health issues escalating. So are we going to see in 3 months' time that we've got another spike in mental health injuries? I hope not. But, you know, it's a huge task for safety professionals and HR professionals to try and manage all of these balls that are in the air at the moment with the coronavirus issue.
Yeah, another thing on that, I was listening to a LinkedIn Live thing this morning, and they were talking about auditing your day when you're working at home, so auditing your time, because as you say, people get lonely, their health issues can start kicking in, and there's nothing more important than exercise. But if you don't set time aside for it, then you're never going to do it. And also, exercise is is the best thing for that mental health, I believe, anyway. And also with auditing your day, just keeping a time check on what you do when you're doing it. It can stop you kind of drifting off to the social media world as well, where people might be probably not on holidays at the moment, but people are doing other fun things, and you're stuck at home. So staying on task, auditing your day, and getting some exercise, I think is the best way.
Yeah, but on that as well, there's the issue of now the drift between your work day and your home day, because you're actually at home the whole time. So there's a huge amount of studies on, being that connected 24/7, how it just increases our anxiety. And by having that 100% being on all the time, and now you're contacting me at home, and this was my space where I could get away from it all, is now being invaded because this is now my workplace. It has huge ramifications. It affects us because we don't switch off. If we don't switch off, well, then, we start to spiral down over time, because, we've got major pressures on us to be working the whole time. This can lead us into, depressive thoughts. It's a problem. We have to check in on each other, and we have to try and have a boundary between what we're doing at home in our so-called work day, as to then when does that switch off and become our home day. So yeah, as employers right now, this is really a major issue to be looking after. And we haven't even had time to even think about it, really. We're just so busy trying to address the coronavirus working arrangements more than anything else.
I'd love to take this opportunity to give an example of, like, if you understand a little bit about the tech option, you can completely transform the user experience. So for working at home, in relation to Helen's question, right now we're using Zoom as the technology solution to try and enable what was going to be a face-to-face interaction. Now, the experience that you're all going to be having on the end of this is probably a little isolating. You're all sitting there not able to talk, which is a little... I was on the receiving end of this the other day, and I found that a little difficult to comprehend. But if you're going to use Zoom as an example to interact with your workforce, and Zoom is free, you can get a free subscription. There's certain things that you can do that are super cool that, if you knew that you could do them, can really improve the experience. So for example, in Zoom, you can have a virtual background. So I can, in my video feed, if we were enabling video here, I could put a mountain scene, or I could put some, landscape of New York City behind me, like I'm in the newsroom, and it's a bit of fun. I could be in a park. You can really create a fun environment. I can use a filter, which might be a little interesting to I can augment how I look. I can touch myself up using touch-up appearance to, reduce the bags under my eyes if I felt that was appropriate. I can automatically transcribe the audio into a transcript. So if I'm generally speaking, if I was a secretarial role, I don't need to bother. I can simply just have that recording. It'll go straight to the hosting environment in the cloud, which will allow me to then just download that transcript. I can scan the text for keywords, and I can filter back through conversations. I can take all of that chat data that was there. I can toggle between the gallery view and the standard view. So you could just be a name, or you could be an image. And you may have seen that a little green highlight goes under the person that's speaking, and when someone else speaks, it'll transfer to them. There are the ability to remotely cast the technology to your TV, so you can have your webinar on the TV and sit on your couch, and you can use your iPhone or your Android phone to control that. There are so many things that you can do to improve the experience that these software providers have been thinking about to do for us, but we just haven't engaged. And this is what I mean by a bit of digital literacy can fundamentally enhance the user experience. And that user experience is absolutely critical for us to be engaging with people when they're working from home. So think about your role in this. And if you really want to become relevant and really enhance the the mental health aspects, the improved connection through technology, you can do that. There are ways to do it. You just need to know how, and you need a little bit of guidance. So yeah, I think it's a fabulous time. I absolutely love what's going on at the moment. Apart from the obviously the bad side of things, it's a beautiful time to be changing and for us to maintain relevance in this space.
I'm going to shift the conversation away from coronavirus and and working from home, and just mention a few technology that we see emerging for people who are mobile and working always mobile, irrespective of whether we have to work from home. And these are emerging, and so you will probably see them, go mainstream probably 2 to 5 years. But it's just something I wanted to throw out there. So there are some fall detection devices. So there are some that are being sold at the moment, but mainstream is probably 2 to 5 years. So that if someone is out and about, they're on their own and they fall down, the people at the, who's responsible for them can be notified and can know about that. So those fall detection devices. There's a lot of lone worker, I guess, apps and also devices that are coming about that allows you to track not just where your workers are, but potentially send them vital information as to where they are, but also know. So let's say they're supposed to check in every 3 to 4 hours and they haven't checked in. So there are those devices coming up. So something to watch out for around that space. So lone worker and fall detection, probably to answer back to the question, what are some of the emerging tech for people out and about? I wanted to throw in. Okay.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we've been going for a little while now, so I think it's about time to wrap up. So I was just going to say, can we get final comments from our 4 panelists? I'll start with you, sir. Anything you want to add in closing?
Not sure. In closing.
Well, I think some of the key points we've really had is really about the digital literacy and the user experience are probably the key themes that keep coming through. The ability to articulate what we want in a way that people can understand and design things for our end user, whether that's the user using the technology or the data that we need to get out of it.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yep. I think as tech providers or tech developers, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're offering the best experience we possibly can, and to help people on their journey to use tech to try and make it as simple and cost efficient and easy as possible, I think is really, really important. So I think, the 4 panelists here, we're all developing software or using, tech. We should be doing the right thing by our end users as well.
Great, thank you. Christine, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of technology out there, and there is no one size fits all. We provide software and mobile app that does specific things. So I guess 3 things I just want people to take away is, when you're adopting technology or looking at technology, don't look at the technology and then try to adopt it. Look at your challenges and what you're trying to solve. Then look for the technology that will solve it for you. Understand those technologies, and if you do not understand and you're not a tech person, speak to the right people, engage with the right people within the organization so you are making the right decisions. And 3, very, very important, I think we all have said it, have your users at the heart of the decision that you make it, and keep it simple for them, because ultimately they will be the ones that actually make it a success or not a success for you.
That's great, Christine. Those are very important takeaways. Stuart, have you got any final comments you'd like to add in?
Yeah, I'll kind of just reiterate what Christine said, but yeah, definitely focus on the people on the ground. They're the ones that we're all working for. If we can keep them safe and keep them working, then that's our ultimate goal. And then try and get data for them, and definitely have a look what's out there. Have a look at technology around the world, and what works in everyday life, and potentially adapt some of that stuff to work that's occurring out there as well in your workplace.
Great, thanks, Stuart. And Cameron, any final comments?
A call to action for me. Next time you are doing an incident investigation, or even have a look at an old one, ask yourself the question in relation to the controls: how might we have prevented this incident if we had included, if there was an emerging technology available in our workplace? And ask yourself that question. And if you don't know the answer to that, I'm not sure if there is, then try and seek out an answer. Have a look around, be inquisitive, be curious, and see if there is. And as Christine said, don't try and jam it, but ask yourself the question: could there, and could have it been something that would have prevented something adverse happening in my workplace? Thanks very much for inviting us along. I was very surprised to get the invite to participate 10 minutes before the, or maybe 15 minutes before the starting time. So thanks everyone for participating, and good luck and be safe over the next bit of time.
Great, thank you, Cameron, and thank you very much to all our panelists, and for everybody who's online, who sort of bared with us through this change of technology that came about sort of at the last minute. And yes, we have had to change a couple of presenters because they had other commitments. Obviously, everybody's very busy at the moment trying to manage everything. So thank you to everybody who's actually brought this together and made it work tonight, and particularly Sue, Christine, Stuart, Cameron. Thank you for taking the time to be here and answer our questions. It's been a great webinar, and hopefully we'll talk more about this topic in the future.
Thank you. Hopefully we got something out of it.
Thanks, Sue.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Still awake, Penny?